Let's do some speaking practice. I'm Melinda, and in this video I'm going to ask you some typical questions that appear on the first part of the speaking test. You should listen and answer the questions aloud. Imagine that you are in the test. When I get to the Group 1 and Group 2 questions, you should pause after each question so that you can answer. And here's a hint, some of your answers should be extended. That means that some of your answers should be 3 or 4 or more sentences, and you should use examples. Ready? Let's begin. Could you show me your identification, please? Thank you. And could you tell me your full name? And what should I call you? Do you work or study? Let's talk about your hometown. Where did you grow up? What kind of place is it? What is the most interesting part? What kinds of jobs do people do there? Is it a good place to live? Now let's talk about hobbies. What do you usually do in your spare time? Do you like to spend time alone? What do you usually do when you go out? Do you like reading? What is a hobby that you would like to try? So these are the questions that you heard. The first 4 questions are always the same, and the first 3 just require very short answers. The 4th question, I suggest that you give 2 or 3 sentences. So for example, if you study, you could say where you study and what you study. The first question in Group 1 was where did you grow up? And here you can talk about the place that you grew up, you can talk about whether it's big or small, whether there's a large or a small population. Is it in the countryside or is it in the city? Is it near the beach? So many different ideas you can talk about. What kind of place is it? You can talk about whether it's modern or old, or whether it's a blend of the two. You can talk about what it was like in the past and what it's like today. You can talk about transport there. Many different things you can talk about. What is the most interesting part? And of course this will be different for every place that people talk about. So maybe it's near the beach, maybe there are a lot of parks, maybe it's very natural, maybe it's very urban, it's in the middle of the city. What kinds of jobs do people do there? Maybe most people are involved in one industry, maybe there's a great variety of industries people are involved in. Maybe it's mainly white collar, meaning office jobs. Maybe it's mainly blue collar, meaning technical or practical jobs. And is it a good place to live? Every place has positives and negatives. You can talk about both sides. In Group 2, the first question was about your spare time. So a range of things to talk about. Do you like spending time alone? Now that's an interesting one because the answer is yes or no, but you need to give more information. So why do you say yes or why do you say no? What do you usually do when you go out? This is very similar to question 1 in this group. And note that it gives you an opportunity to use a more complex structure. So usually I X, but sometimes I Y. Do you like reading? Again, it's yes or no, so you need to give more information. Why or why not? Or what kinds of things do you read? Or if you don't read, what do you do instead? And the last question, a hobby that you'd like to try. Notice the structure of this last question is different to all the others. This is asking a hypothetical question. It uses the word would, so you'd meaning you would. What is a hobby you would like to try? And your answer should contain would. I would like to try, or I'd like to try. So this is inviting you to use a different structure to the rest, but even the other questions, although they are about the present, you have opportunity to use complex sentences. You can go back into the past, so today my city, and talk about today, but when I was a child, and then you can be talking about the past. So you have opportunity to show your ability in a few different tenses using a few different kinds of structures. So key things to note. The questions in this first section of the speaking test, they're familiar and they're relatively easy. They're all topics that you've seen in English textbooks at an intermediate level or below. So think about the tense of the questions. You can give some short answers or just a few words sometimes, but you must also give extended answers sometimes. There are no right or wrong answers, and the only rule is that your answers must be relevant. In the real test, the examiner won't ask you a question if you have already answered it. In this test, I may have asked something that you had already answered, but clearly I couldn't hear your answers, so I apologize for that. It's unlikely to happen in the real test. But sometimes you may want to use similar information to answer a different question. And note, and this is important, please don't say, as I told you before, or as I said before, because the tone is wrong. It's like saying to the examiner, what's wrong with you? Weren't you listening when I said this earlier? And clearly you don't want to speak to the examiner in that way, so please avoid this phrase. It's better just to repeat the information if you need to. Okay, so that's the end of this video. For more practice, for tips and help with IELTS, please check my blog at ieltswithmelinda.com.